Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Guide Spotlight, and we are spotlighting Adrian Martin. Welcome, Adrian, and of course, hello, Jill.
Hello.
But welcome,
Hi,
Adrian. We're
everybody.
thrilled to have you. Yeah.
Hi, Adrian.
It's
So,
great to be
Adrian,
here, part of Cine Journeys.
likewise, we're proud of you. Yeah, we're big fans. We've been following you forever. In fact, before recording, we were talking about your a recent commentary that was released on Umbrella, "The Fire Within." Louis Mal. If you haven't seen his early work, that's quite a treasure. But Adrian, you're going to be involved with Cine Journeys. Really looking forward to what you come up with. But we already have Fritz Lang inside the machine, which we'll talk about here shortly. But for those who don't know you, Adrian, would you like to introduce yourself and just talk about some of your experience, what you like, your specialties, that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I'm a film critic. I guess I write about film and talk about film, and I've done so for 45 years now, since I was a teenager. I've done it in public, and I've done it in all sorts of situations in Australia, where I was born and lived for a long time. I wrote for a newspaper there. I was a film reviewer. I had a radio show. I was on TV occasionally talking about film. I've taught in universities on and off in my life. I've done a lot of audio commentary work that you mentioned, Aaron, and for companies like Criterion and Radiance and the British Film Institute. Today I write about a film, some film that I've seen. I watch a film a day, and I try to write every day. A lot of that goes into my website, which is a sort of a big ongoing archive of the stuff that I do. In terms of the kinds of cinema I'm interested in, I have very wide tastes. I mean, some of my specialities are American cinema, both sort of old classical and modern contemporary American cinema. French cinema is something I know very well throughout its whole history. I've done a lot of work on Japanese cinema, German cinema, Australian cinema, of course, I know very well from living there. And any number of directors, like wildly different directors that I love, whether it's John Cassavetes or Jean-Luc Godard. Chantal Akerman is one of my favorites. Elaine May, fantastic filmmaker. I work the waterfront in terms of all the different genres and directors and styles of cinema. And that's what I like to reflect in my work is sort of seeing the connections between all these different films and different ideas, because I've also written a lot about the history of film criticism itself, film theory, and all that kind of stuff. I've spent a lot of time with all of that, but my main drive is to get people to watch films, to watch them enthusiastically and thoughtfully, to think about how films are made, what is the style of films, how does that express what they're on about and what they do to us. So yeah, they're some of my main drives as a film person.
So everything, everything bagel. Well, very,
Basically
very
everything,
exciting. So that the sky's the limit. And so there are a lot of topics to explore here at Cine Journeys and elsewhere. And by the way, you have a Wikipedia page, which if you want to see not everything, but a lot of what the kind of the greatest hits of what you've done, that's all there. But you've done numerous commentaries, as you mentioned, Seven Samurai, lots of huge films and wonderful commentaries, very insightful. So we are thrilled to have you. You're going to be talking about Fritz Lang here in the fall, here in a couple months. And so if I could ask, what is it about Fritz Lang that wanted you to explore and teach him? What about him do you think students and or subscribers will find interesting?
Well, Fritz Lang is one of these figures who, to me, is sort of endlessly fascinating and endlessly exciting. His work is so exciting, but he's sort of surrounded by myths and legends, and some people might think casually, oh yeah, he was the guy who made silent classics. You know, he made Metropolis. He made some early sound films. But there are people who don't know what he went on to be, which was a director in Hollywood. And he worked there for a whole lot of years. And then, as it were, at the end of his career, he kind of reinvented himself again by returning to Germany and going back to some of his original sources of inspiration in mythology, in these German thrillers that he had made, the Mabuse films, the series he'd done in the 1920s and 30s. So what is fantastic about Lang as a subject for Cine Journeys is that I really want to give a sense of all of these different periods and all of the changes, the different contexts, the different social situations that his films reflect and comment on. Because really what's so great about Fritz Lang as a filmmaker is that he is so precise that sometimes he gets the cliched, oh, he's a cold filmmaker, just into control. But in fact, the more you dig into Fritz Lang, you realize, hey, the guy made Westerns. He did a musical. Yes. You know, there's a fantasy element. There's a childlike innocence to some of his films, such as the film of the 50s called Moonfleet, one of the most wonderful films ever made for children, ever. And so this is the sort of complex picture of Fritz Lang that I really would like to communicate to the Cine Journeys audience.
And as you can see, those who are watching this on video, I'm scrolling through the class here, and yes, you cover that very well. I want to highlight Lang is of extraordinary significance, on par with Hitchcock, Bresson, Ackerman, who you already mentioned, and many others. Quite the filmmaker, and so here we have the early years, his German years. And then, of course, I love how this is still German, serial killers and mad geniuses.
I love that.
Yeah, the Mabuse groupings. And then, of course, his American years, as you mentioned, noir, and as you mentioned, Moonfleet here, the fantasies. These films are less known. So what do you think people through, I mean, the 5 weeks, but there's quite a span here of Lang films. What do you think people will take away from these from this absorption into his, or immersion into his filmography?
I mean, apart from getting this sort of series of snapshots from Lang's career, the thing I really would want to communicate is the absolute brilliance and the sort of the concreteness of Fritz Lang's style, his way of making films. When researchers went into Fritz Lang's archive of papers, they found copies of the scripts that he worked with. And sometimes the scripts were just handed to Lang, particularly in Hollywood, to shoot. But what he did is that literally he would start annotating the scripts and drawing on them and drawing maps of where the camera would go and how he would break up the scene and what the lighting plan would be. And this has been called the double script of Fritz Lang. Like, he would write his own script, as it were, of film style on top of the narrative script. And that's what I hope to get people to really appreciate, that there is a style that is so expressive and so suggestive in Fritz Lang's films that he could film anything really and make it his own, make it express his particular evolving view of the world, of society.
Adrian, what I'm really excited about is that you are covering that full extent of Lang's career, because so many people only know, maybe his German years or maybe his film noir, but they don't know the full range of what he was capable of doing and what he was very good at. And I do love that you've programmed Moonfleet here. That is such a kind of underseen movie. So I'm really glad that everyone's going to have the opportunity to really see that, and also that transition from what he was making in Germany and then how he became a Hollywood film director, but he was still applying all of those things that he did. And I mean, his films are weird and in a good, and I mean that complimentary. I'm
Yes.
actually very, very thrilled to see, to learn from this class. Absolutely.
I mean, when you mentioned the weirdness of Fritz Lang, I think that's, in fact, what makes him still very contemporary. You know, his films are still very contemporary because they have such levels of irony, of dark commentary on the way the world works and the way society works, whether it's German society or American society. He had a pitiless vision on the way things work, whether that's the relations between men and women or it's the police and criminals. You know, he had such a withering eye, such a withering sensibility, and you know, when you put that with all of his own personal obsessions and sort of fascinations and fantasies, you know, all of which are coming out in his work, I mean, you've got someone whose work never dies. You know, I mean, it totally retains its fascination.
Great
Awesome.
point. Yeah, and yeah, it's going to be
Yeah.
a great 5 weeks. We'll have the link here in the show notes for you to register. There will be the list can seem overwhelming. I think, Adrian, you are planning to highlight maybe one film per week, which will probably by the time you look at
I'm
that.
quite
Yeah.
happy to sort of to make one key film a week. I mean, I'm going to talk about other films and hopefully introduce some other films to people, you know, so that they can seek them out later. And I'll be giving the full span of his career, but I'm quite happy to have, you know, for instance, Scarlet Street as the main American film of the 40s, because Scarlet Street is an incredibly important film in my life. You know, it's a film I saw as a teenager. Totally changed the way that I see films. I suddenly saw all of this work of style, of the lighting, of the imagery and the sound. Incredible pioneer of sound design. Fritz Lang was incredible with that too. And so that's a film that means so much to me. It'll be a key film of that week. Moonfleet will be a key film. Probably Metropolis.
So people don't have to feel overwhelmed by looking at all of these films. There's going to be
absolutely. They don't have to watch 40 films. They don't have to do reading. I mean, I'll be in the various resources that Cine Journeys offers. I'll be mentioning things that people want to read. I'll tell them what I think they should read on Fritz Lang, and I'll mention all of the films, which is almost every film Fritz Lang ever made. It's worth seeing, you know, because Lang is one of these directors. I mean, everything he did is interesting, you know, at one level or another. You know, sometimes more accomplished than another, but I mean, his sort of hit rate on masterpieces is pretty darn high.
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely.
I just checked, and Moonfleet is not really widely streaming, so that might not be the hit film, but we'll find ones that will work.
We'll figure it out.
Adrian, before we let you go, are there any other topics or filmmakers or movements that you would like to cover in the near future or long distance future? I'm sure the list is endless, but any top of mind for you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for instance, I've always thought, I once made a pronouncement somewhere at a university event. I said, if you want to understand the cinema, there's only 2 directors that you really should know totally well, and then you'll understand everything. And those 2 directors were Fritz Lang and Ernst Lubitsch, you know, which might seem a strange pair, but in fact, there's a lot of unusual overlap and sort of correspondence. And what became Scarlet Street was a film that Lubitsch was originally going to make, for instance. That's only one of many, many overlaps in their career. Yeah. Wow.
See, I'm already learning something.
Yep. Sure. So Lubitsch, you know, we know him for his romantic comedies, for his sophisticated comedies. Once again, an absolute master of style, of image, of sound, of cinematic storytelling. And we talk in sometimes lazy about the Lubitsch touch. But there is a Lubitsch touch, and it's precisely the way that he organized every scene, the way he worked with his writers, a very rigorous way that he got the writers to write cinematically for him so that it would be a good film, not just a good story, not just interesting characters, but a really good and inventive film, right? So Fritz Lang and Lubitsch, to me, are the 2 of the greatest inventive filmmakers, and anyone who's interested in filmmaking at any level, whether they want to make films themselves, whether they just want to watch films in a new sort of way, more aware way, whether they just want to enjoy films in a richer way, you know, Lang and Lubitsch are the two keys, at least in my view of cinema. So I'd love to do a Lubitsch course. That would be fun and be great.
You will find no opposition here. We love Lang and Lubitsch, so that's very exciting that you've got that cooking for down the line. So,
but in terms of other filmmakers, I mean, in terms of some of my specialities I mentioned before, I'd love to do a course on Francois Truffaut, on Jean-Luc Godard, on Claire Denis. I'd love to do a course on John Cassavetes, who's been an obsession of mine since I was a teenager. I'm writing a book with my partner Christina on Brian De Palma. So Brian De Palma is someone whose work I know inside out. There's all kinds of stuff. Max Ophuls, Joseph von Sternberg, Nicholas Ray, Samuel Fuller. Well, stop me now.
Everybody hates all of those. No, that's
He's
great.
Like, all of it. We're going to do classes for all of it. Well, Adrian, this was wonderful. We're so excited to have you join us at Cine Journeys. Everyone that's watching this, whether you're a Cine Journeys member or not, we would love you to come join and register for Adrian's class. It's going to be incredible. So if you go to cinejourneys.com, follow Cine Journeys on YouTube, you will see all the information and have the opportunity to register and receive updates. This is going to be a great class. So we're super excited.
Can't wait, Adrian.
Me too.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.